Good morning, everyone. This is Linda from Food Focus.
And Adele.
Thank you so much for joining us on this Friday Fundamentals. And we're really looking forward to chatting to you today. Thanks for taking your Friday coffee break. I hope you've got your coffee. If you haven't got your coffee, you should have your coffee, because we're going to have a conversation about auditing today, which has been a very, very interesting or a lot of interest as a result of this in this presentation. So we're going to just walk through a couple of slides just to make 100% sure that you're comfortable with what we are going to be talking about today, and also just in relation to what's happening with your webinar screen. So if I can just get mine to move, that would also be very, very helpful. In terms of being able to hear us, I'm hoping you can. We are coming to you through your computer audio, so if you can't hear us, there's probably a problem with your audio, so please won't you just double check that for me. Also, make sure that you use the question bar to communicate with us, because we'd very much like to hear your questions. We do know that there's a lot of interest in the topic, so if you've got questions, won't you start popping them into the question bar immediately, because that way we can ensure that we get to them at the end of the presentation today. So don't wait. As the question pops up, please won't you pop it into the question bar. Adele, we've got a very, very busy lineup. We've got lots of people that are joining us today. We managed to get a whole bunch of real live auditors. So why don't you tell us a little about them?
Yes, I'm very, very excited, Linda, and I'm so glad that, you know, they're definitely going to introduce themselves. But we want to thank each one of them, you know, for their time and effort. So we've got Donna Crocker from SGS. She's the Certification and Business Enhancement the Business Manager for Certification and Business Enhancement. Let me try that again. Donna is from SGS, and she is the Business Manager for Certification and Business Enhancement. Then we've also got Reshmi Badasi, and she is the Director and Founder and Food Safety Specialist from Food Tech Solutions. And we've got Cal Snow from Food Consulting Services. He is the KZN Regional Manager over all the auditors for auditing in the KZN region. Then we've got Tia Laufs. She's the MD for the South African CPG Global certification body, and the technical director as well. And then, very interesting, we've got Jeff Kalfkens. She is a Master Food Science student at Stellenbosch, but her real passion, or her real name before that, is that she's our wannabe food safety auditor. So she's definitely also going to ask a lot of questions to these people. So thank you, guys. Thank you for your time, and over to you, Linda.
Thanks, Adele. Right, Jess, won't you come online, please? Because as we go through the interview with the panel, Jess has got some really important questions for the panel, and she wants to know the answers to these questions, and we really feel that these are probably questions that there are many of you out there that would like to ask. So we asked Jess to come and pose the questions herself, so that she has an opportunity to interact, but also to get the information that we all need. So I've been in auditing for a long time. In fact, I've kind of like gotten over auditing. I audited many companies, and have had my opportunity to, I suppose, be involved in this sector. I've enjoyed teaching other auditors how to do food safety audits. But I think when it comes to the real practicalities of auditing, and most importantly, running an auditing company and understanding what it means to be employed as an auditor, that was the reason why we've asked this group of people to join us today, because they are all employers in their own right, and so they have very specific requirements when it comes to you know, making sure that their auditors are adequately competent. So let's get going. Jess, what do you say? Let's ask these people some questions. So Tia, won't you please come online so that we can ask you some questions about your experience as an auditor, and then also how you could assist wannabe auditors going forward. So first of all, give us an introduction to CPG. What does CPG do, and how are you involved with food safety auditing in South Africa?
Thanks, Linda. Yes, CPG, Certification Partner Global, is an Australian-owned and full-scope international certification and training body. We are recognized by JAZANS, which is your joint accreditation system for Australia and New Zealand. We're also accredited by SANAS, the South African National Accreditation System in South Africa, for management systems, and also by Exemplar Global for training internationally. We certify small and large companies, and we're based in 28 countries, and I'm managing the food side of the business in terms of the technical approval, making sure the auditors are approved and compliant to scheme requirements and certification requirements.
Okay, so now what you just said is really important, because you've said that the auditors have to be appropriately qualified to scheme requirements and certification requirements. So that means that before I can actually become an auditor, it sounds like there's a series of criteria that I would have to conform to, and we'd like to know a little bit more about that. But before we get into it, why did you decide to become an auditor? Because you've been in the industry as long as I've been in the industry. Why auditing? Why did you decide to move into this part of the food industry?
Yes, Linda, I think we have been in the industry a long time, and I don't think we're going to declare our age here. We've started obviously all in the food industry, working for the industry, performing quality assurance, implementation of HACCP those years before it evolved to food safety systems. Started with the internal auditing, and it just evolved, and we became external auditors, supplier audits to start off with, and then later on I qualified myself doing a lead auditor course to become a lead auditor, going with people and trained, and then auditing for certification bodies in South Africa, and then later on I bought the agency for Africa in terms of CPG. But I think auditing has always been a passion, food safety is a passion, and I think that was the next step to take to become an auditor as well.
Now, Tia, you have done a lot of work in the red meat industry. For years, you worked in close association with the Red Meat Abattoir Association. So you have a lot of technical expertise within that part of the sector. If I was wanting to audit in red meat, what technical requirements would I need as an auditor? Because surely technical competence in a particular sector in the food industry is important.
Yes, and that is. Anybody can do an audit, and it also differ in terms of what level of auditing you're doing, if you're doing hygiene audit or FSSC audit. But in terms of any auditing, you need the technical knowledge, and I think that is why it's one of the requirements for a SATCA or a CB, where you need the work experience. What is the reason for that? If you talk about the meat industry specific now, if you look at an abattoir, you need to know what is meat inspection. You need to know what is animal diseases. You have to be able to identify risk associated in this industry in terms of auditing. It's not just a paper exercise. So you need to have the work experience and the technical knowledge to be able to perform an audit where you could identify possible problems if they are there. So I think that is quite important.
Absolutely. So I've done lots of audits, but I've never been in an abattoir. I never want to go in an abattoir, but I like steak. But the point of this is, I would not make a good auditor in that environment because I don't have that technical work experience that you've said.
No.
Jess, why don't you ask Tia a question about possible auditor training that would be needed in order to work for an accredited certification body like CPG?
Yeah, so one of the questions I did pose to Linda before this event was to become an auditor, relatively high up, as I would like to audit companies one day and not just do internal audits. Obviously, you need to do both. What would be the qualifications, both on the academic side as well as extra qualifications, you know, things like the ISO certifications that you would need to do in order to get there?
Yes, Jess, we're always happy if there's young people that wants to join the auditing teams in South Africa. It's fantastic. What you definitely must have first is you will be able to travel a lot and you will work very hard because you have to write your report sometimes at night. So step one, you must decide if you want to do this. Then if you look at qualifications and experience, I spoke about the work experience just now. I'm going to talk about the FSSC requirements because that is the highest level in terms of auditing that you need in terms of qualifications. So obviously a degree in a food-related discipline you need. You will then have to comply or do a lead auditor course of 40 hours minimum based on ISO 19011 and also your ISO 17021 and ISO 22003. Part of that, because of food safety, you need a HACCP training course of 16 hours and an exam. Your ISO 22000 as well, including an exam. And then things like, but that is part of that, and I think it's quite buzzwords the last couple of years, is food offense and food fraud. But then very importantly, you need to do a technical PRP relevant training in the field that you're going to audit. So if it's food, you will look at your 22002-1. If it's packaging, it will be -4. So that technical PRPs is also very important training that you must have because that is the baseline of your auditing that you need, depending is it food or you're going to do a packaging audit in the food industry. You
Thanks,
also
Tia.
have to.
Sorry,
Yes.
Tia, that's good. I think we're going to get into more detail shortly when we start talking about even the accreditation requirements. So if I can summarize what you've said is, I've got to have a qualification, and it sounds like it's at least an NQF level 6 in terms of science, or maybe even NQF level 7, and then auditor training. But the auditor training is only a part of it. There's the technical training. I must know what I'm going to audit. In other words, I've got to know the rules of the game, depending on what I'm auditing. And that could be the passive component, plus it could be the PRP requirement. We'll definitely come back to that, Tia. Thank you very much for your insights. Don't go away. We'll ask you to come back a little bit later if you don't mind. Jess, we're going to now move to another certification body. So we're going to bring up SGS. Donna, thank you so much, Tia, for now. Donna, if you can come on board, please. We have another certification body. So there's Donna Crockett. Donna, give us a 1-minute overview of SGS, because it's also a global organization that offers certification services in a range of different environments, including obviously food safety.
Yes, so SGS, gosh, it's a massive company, a global company. We are the world's leading provider of testing, inspection, verification, and certification activities. We are recognized as the benchmark in terms of quality and integrity. And, you know, we add our value through to society by enabling a better, more safer, interconnected world. So I take care of the Southern African region for all the certification, auditing, training activities. And gosh, we offer those services across every sector you can imagine. It's food, aviation, forestry, every industry, every standard, SGS does it.
Okay, so now, if we have to be honest, now come on, I want the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. You started your auditing career on the other side of the table. In other words, if we go back to your roots, you originally started getting involved with food safety audits when you were working as Pick and Pay, where you were requiring your suppliers to be audited in order to supply the markets. Am I correct?
Yes, yes. So, gosh, that started sort of at the end of the 90s, sort of 1999, 2000, somewhere around there, where Pick and Pay was looking.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we were looking to start auditing our suppliers of the corporate brand initially, and but we knew there was auditing happening, but there was nothing much available in terms of food safety. So long story short, we got involved with the GFSI. one of my first auditing courses I did was ISO 9001, because there was no food safety management system auditor course available. And then Robin Wallace and we went off to GFSI and came back, and so that process started. And I was very fortunate to get involved in that business opportunity, and it was a very exciting process because it was all new, and the auditing standards were still being developed. The all of that, working through SATCA and all of those things, Linda, that you know about, and doing the retail audit, supplier audits. So we were the middle guy. We have a client and we have the supplier. But we were providing what you call a second party audit, but as a third party, actually. We're a third party, but we were conducting the Pick n Pay audit, their criteria and so forth. And as it evolved over the years, eventually it did become a third party process. And the process was always aligned with, if you want to say, accreditation requirements. But we had a little bit of flexibility in that regard. So the retail audit was mainly, auditing the customer's requirements. And yes, they did get involved in their processes, but we also tried to make sure that there was that impartiality as well. So Pick n Pay couldn't really get involved in the outcome of the audits. That's why we were there, is to manage that process and ensure that that the processes were credible and up to standard and what have you. But sometimes it did get a bit tricky because we have a client who has certain requirements and we may not be meeting that requirement for them, but yet we have to do a job on that side and do it properly. So it was that fine balancing act. But it was a really exciting process. The joy to see a lot of those suppliers, the growth that they made over the years, and very much, in particular, I was always so impressed with the smaller suppliers. They just seemed to you would go and audit them, and sadly they wouldn't do so well, and it was devastating. I mean, many a time I would get in my car and I'd be in tears, literally, I promise. I am a soft person sometimes, but I'd be in tears because they were devastated, But boy, oh boy, 6 months later, you get there and they've just changed their whole business. I mean, that was great. That was really great.
Yeah. So I think one of the things that Donna's highlighted, which is important, is that you can be in a situation where a company, an auditing company, is providing auditing services for a particular audit client. And I'm sure, Donna, that this continues even as a certification body. You may be doing this kind of auditing process on suppliers, but now it's almost like the bar's been slightly raised in that you have an accredited certification body offering these services on behalf of a big corporate or a big international business. Yeah. Now, when it comes to the training requirements, Jess, I think we need to ask, are the training requirements different for this kind of audit, Donna? I mean, if you go back to sort of the retail kind of audits, is it the same kind of training process that, Tia mentioned for certification?
No, absolutely. And that's exactly why a company would want to use a accredited certification body, because the processes are in place, the management systems are in place, the qualifications of the auditors, all of those processes are in place. And I mean, that's what we do. That's our business. That's our speciality. So yes, we have very large global clients all over the world. What we do is we do, it's referred to as a customized audit. So they might require the basis of the audit being, for example, ISO 22 or FSSC or whatever it is, a social compliance audit, but then they have their additional bits that go onto it. And then, of course, we have to be trained on that. And then they would have different cycles, and, it's quite intense to manage all these different programs, because, I get a little bit frustrated sometimes because, the GFSI their intention was to minimize benchmark so that there's recognition. I mean, this is probably a discussion for another day. But actually, what's happened is the GFSI benchmark schemes are now, there's now additionals with customers. So what happened to that recognition process? I mean, we have clients, sorry, I'm going off tangent. But yes, the same criteria, same criteria, same processes, same training, same everything.
Okay. Jess, you wanted to ask me about witness audits. Ask Donna about witness audits. It's complicated.
Yeah. Pretty much, if you can just explain how it happens and what are the differences and stuff.
Yes, so to become an auditor, we obviously have our minimum criteria of qualification. So depending on what you're auditing will depend on what qualification you need, tertiary qualification. Then you need your industry experience in processing, food manufacture, food safety.
Sorry,
No, it's fine. 5 years minimum. Yeah. Okay. And then, of course, there's the training, the auditor training, recognized auditor training, training in the standard, the scheme, regulatory knowledge. It depends on what you're auditing. And some schemes require registration to the body. So, for example, social compliance, you have to be an APSCA registered member, or FSSC, you also get approved there. So it all depends on what you're doing. They have all the requirements. But in terms of witnessing, so if you're a brand new auditor and you meet all of those requirements, you've never audited before, you would have to now be, shadow auditors for a certain number of days over a certain number of audits. And again, each scheme has their own requirements. Then what will happen is you will then be witnessed by a lead auditor, observed, and then that lead auditor would have to sign you off and approve you, provided that you've performed and met all the requirements.
So I think I had a very specific question with regard to that that I'd asked before, not in this talk, but just in terms of those witness hours, is that something I can only start after I've gotten all these qualifications, or would I be able to start it now, while I'm finishing off my studies? And then also, is there particular things that you need to keep your eye out for from your personal perspective when doing the witness audits?
Well, yes, there's no harm in you in terms of your getting experience and knowledge and learning in you doing witnessing and going out and doing all of that. I mean, that's great. However, in terms of becoming a qualified auditor and signed off and all of that, there is a certain order of events that have to take place. So you would not be able to go and witness now and then do your auditor training later. It can't work like that. So yes, it has to. There's a certain order that these things have to happen. Then, just in terms of what to look out for, if I understand your question, are you talking about the type of person we're looking for?
Yeah.
The personality traits. Well, gosh, there's obviously the very well documented requirements in 19011. And we all know what those are. You need to, be decisive and have tenacity and do all of those things. But over and above that, gosh, well, obviously ethics is number one. Ethics is number one. You have to be a really strong, confident person to be able to stand within the ethics. Because auditing, you are subjected to all sorts of, people are going to try and influence you from all sorts of angles. I've been locked in an office before. They wouldn't let me go until he wanted 80%, and I'm like, well, I'm going to be here forever then, because it's not going to happen. So, and there's many stories like that. So you have to be really confident. You have to be completely organized and plan. You have to plan, be organized, be prepared. Time management is critical. By the way, this is not an 8-to-5 job, because it's traveling. It's traveling, report writing. For me, that was the worst part. Loved the audit, but the report was hell on earth. But you've got to do it. You've got to do it straight away, because if you don't, you get behind and So, and then of course, energetic person and somebody who's passionate And then obviously, without a doubt, knowledge and constant learning. You have to constantly keep up to date. But I think in this day now, technology. So you have to be up to date. I mean, we've got some fantastic, brilliant auditors who are now in their 60s and what have you. And, you know, great mentors and what have you, but they're a little bit behind on the technology side. So they might be a bit slower on that type of thing. But going forward, digitization that's where it's going. So yeah.
Thanks, Donna. Okay, don't go away. We'll come back to you just now. Thank you so much for sharing your passion for auditing and your experience. Thanks so much. Reshmi, it's time to talk to someone who's actually been through this process, because you've been in industry and then you decided to go to the other side of the table, but you've got years and years of experience of being the auditee. So I definitely want to hear about your horror stories of auditors that you decided you would never be like. So first of all, tell us a little bit about food tech.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much, Linda, for this great opportunity. So I'm the founder of Food Tech Solutions, Pty Limited, and we are a company, a 2.5-year-old company, I'm glad to say, surviving the pandemic, that specializes in the following food safety services. It's training, systems development, systems implementation, microbiological testing of foods, and then, of course, food safety auditing. So the audits we do for our clients are for clients who actually want value to be added to their systems. So we do any type of audit, ranging from a gap audit or a pre-assessment audit to an internal audit. You know, it's always nice to have the external person, or the non-biased person to come through your plant and notice and pick up the things that you don't, or you walk right past. We also do verification audits. So if you're looking at implementing or going for HACCP or ISO or FSSC certification, you've implemented the system, you're not quite sure yet whether you're ready or not, you can definitely give us a buzz. So please visit our website, www.foodtech.co.za, to get more information. Thank you.
Thanks, Reshmi. Now, what's important about what you just said is you conduct unaccredited audits. In other words, the audits that you do will not result in a certificate, but they will result in a report which allows me to action and to improve my system. And there's a very good place for those. And to be quite honest, I prefer those because it just allows me to be part of the improvement process as opposed to just being part of the ticking process and the kind of final process at the end of the day. But you can't issue the certificate. So tell us about your experience as an auditee. Tell us about 3 memorable experiences where you had auditors from hell.
All right, so I have the experience, I think it's 12 years of experience of being an auditee and possibly having 10 to 12 audits per year. So that's a lot of auditors as an auditee, definitely way more than an auditor. So, when I decided to get into auditing, I had to look at the things that absolutely irked me about auditors and do the complete opposite. So yeah, my top 3 experiences for you was, firstly, as an auditor, please don't insult the intelligence of the auditee. So here I was running a HACCP system at a red meat processing plant, being the only South African to hold a master's degree, an international master's degree in HACCP. And I had some arrogant auditors, that just couldn't keep their arrogance to themselves. And as much as I don't smoke, I had to invent smoke breaks just so I could get out of the room, calm down, come back refreshed and continue with the audit. Okay, so that's the first one. The second one is, and for me, the biggest gripe, I think, as a quality manager, when it comes to audits, it's like that's your final exam in a plant. So, quality managers go all out in their preparation and the preparation of their teams. And it doesn't just start the day before, the week before, the month before. It starts from day one of that year. And so when I got an auditor that was very, and I mean, you can always tell when they're very wet behind their ears, you know, somebody that just came out of university or college or something of that nature, not much, and no offense, Jess, you know, not much practical experience. That irked me the most because I really felt like I was really wasting my valuable time, and I would actually hand over those audits to my quality control officers as a training session, you know, for them to be auditees in the future. And last but not least, something positive, you know, about the auditors that I came across. I truly enjoyed the absolutely tough, challenging audits that I went through. Because as a quality manager, you work with the system every day and possibly every night of your life as well. You know, and I appreciated the criticism. I appreciated somebody coming to the site, reviewing, you know, the processes, reviewing the systems and telling me how I could improve. Because when you set up the systems, you develop them, and maintaining the system is actually the tough part, because how do you actually improve a system that has already been certified upon, you know? So I had, unfortunately, some bad experiences where I had some major audits, some of them two-day audits. You know, those can be quite draining. A lot of preparation goes into it, and we do something like the plant walkthrough, and we come back, you know, and the closing meeting at day one, and I'd find, but gee whiz, the auditor didn't pick up anything, and I would be shocked because I walk around with my notebook, and I had a whole page of things that I'd actually missed out on the week before. You know, so then I felt like, gee whiz, this is really a waste of money and a waste of time. So I think as an auditee, you know, and as auditees, we should welcome the criticism and we should welcome the findings, because that helps us improve the system.
Absolutely. I don't think an easy food safety audit benefits food safety at all. And that's not what we need in the food industry. But I think one of the points that you did mention, which is important, Reshmi, is there's a difference between constructive criticism and pedanticism, which is not, you know, supporting the system. So please don't give me a finding because I have a spelling error in my policy. Don't even waste your time writing that down, because that's not adding any value to my system. But don't walk past something that is so significant within the facility and not mention it. So I think that's you know, that's important. It'll be interesting to hear from Tia and Donna, because I know there's often a bit of pressure on them from a certification perspective, because of course the person who's being audited is paying for the audit, and you want to keep the client happy, but you also want to make sure that the standards are maintained. So tell me, Reshmi, you've transitioned from being a quality manager, technical director, in fact, all the way through to now auditing 4 certification bodies. As I understand it, you subcontract your services to a number of certification bodies where you are an auditor. How long did it take you to transition, bearing in mind that you worked within the meat industry for 12 years? This process that Jess wanted to understand, how long did it take you before you could actually conduct your very first audit alone?
All right, so luckily with the years of practical experience as well as the technical qualifications, that absolutely helped a lot. And it also depends on which organization you are subcontracting your services to. So I was very fortunate that the very first organization that I subcontracted my services to was actually Intertech, which is not only global, but you know, also does retailer audits. And one of the nice things about that audit is when I was in auditee, that was one of my tough, challenging audits. It was one of the audits I appreciated. Sometimes those pedantic auditors were part of that group, and I couldn't believe I'd become one of them as well. Or, you know, I was on my way to becoming one of them. But it's a very comprehensive audit that focuses not only on HACCP or GMPs, but on requirements or key requirements from ISO 22000 and FSSC. So it gives you a great overall overview of food safety management systems. So beside the SADCA certification process as an auditor, which is still in progress for myself actually, I had to do 4 shadow audits. So shadow audits are actually not that difficult at all, because you've got to go there and basically be an observer. If you're someone like me that's a busybody and likes to be busy, it can be a little bit painful. But I was quite glad that from my very first audit, the auditor that I had accompanied, and obviously I knew them previously because I was once their auditee. They did give me a couple sections to review, so it was great to be able to do that. And as much as I did 4 shadow audits with 4 different auditors, what I observed was the way they audit, the manner and how they conduct the audit. Yes, we all have a framework and a protocol to work with, but there are certain things that auditors focus on. So it was completely different for each one. So then I had this gigantic, and it seemed like a gigantic task at that stage, because I was now ready to audit on my own. So I had one of the lead auditors, very well experienced, very seasoned auditor, come and audit a company. So it was a very, very unnerving experience, to say the least. But it was also a really good experience, because it just gives you that extra confidence to go out there and become an auditor. So the timing depends on the organization being able to get you the required number of shadow audits as well as that final audit. Because unfortunately in industry, there are some companies that one auditor is too much for them, actually. So they don't want a second person accompanying them. And I think it would be great if industry could change their mentality about that. At the end of the day, the auditors are there to help you improve your system. So welcome the chance of having a shadow or a trainee auditing on site, because actually what you're really getting technically is sort of 2 auditors for the price of 1. I mean, what a great deal that is, Not
everyone's going to share.
So it was. Hopefully, I'm open the road for all future auditors or trainee auditors here. And so it was. As I said, it was a good experience, and here I am.
But it has taken a little while, and I think that's important. Jess, a question from your side to Reshni, because you've now, you've heard she's been on both sides of the table. So what would you like to ask her?
Okay, hi Reshni. Sorry, it's so nice to meet you. So well done on surviving COVID, number 1. If you could go back to your first day, as being an auditor and now this transition, what would you have done differently now looking back?
So I think I would have managed my time a little bit better. Because I sort of did go over half an hour, more than the end time that I had stipulated on the audit schedule. So I wish that I had accounted for that. That it's my first audit. I have no idea. It's a different industry, and just sort of add in some buffer time for that. But other than that, gee whiz. There's nothing really that I changed. Look, over the year, or over the audits, I would say, because it's just about 2 years that I'm auditing. You obviously develop certain skills, and as Donna mentioned previously, time management is key. You only have literally 8 hours, 8 to 9 hours. Well, it can be more, unless the auditee decides to kick you off site, because now you're there at 7 p.m., 7:30 p.m., their staff needs to go home, etc. So I've developed certain, if I can call it hacks, that I use that helps me with better time management. Like, for example, something very simple would be, even though they would have done an annual traceability study, I would like to see them do a mock traceability study, especially if it's a big company and they've got like 100 checklists. There's no way I would be able to go through 100 files to pick up a finding. And sometimes you get to that pedantic stage where you make a list of where they haven't, dotted their I's or crossed their T's, just for the sheer, just for saying, okay, I have a list of findings. It can be tough to actually find findings, because I must say the food safety standards out there, it's quite hard. So normally, when you do an on-site traceability, it's very easy to pick up the gaps. So that helps me to save time, and then I audit possibly at least 30 to 40% of the checklist or the requirements in sort of one go.
At the same time.
So you just learn these things with experience,
Absolutely. Thank you, Reshmi. We'll come back to you. We're now going to go to Shane, the only man on the panel. Cal, thank you so much for chatting to us today. Thanks, Reshmi. We'll chat just now. Cal is from Food Consulting Services. So, Cal, won't you give us an introduction to who is FCS and what do they do?
Okay, FCS, we to give a very short summary, is we help guys pretty much fill in the gap for guys who are looking for help in getting their system sorted out. We don't do the accredited or the certified audits per se, but we do. I mean, there's various terms for what we would do, but it's gap auditing or just helping guys getting off their feet. A lot of the times we're finding people don't actually know where to start. So that's one of the sectors we, particularly with the auditing sectors, where we fill that gap. FCS itself started in 1977 with the lab and testing. We've now built ourselves up to having 3 regions, major regions around the country: Cape Town, KZN, and our head office in Joburg. The head office in Joburg also houses our SANAS accredited lab, where we test all our stuff, our samples, and so on and so forth. And then our auditing department we built up to having partnerships with large and small companies. So you've got small, what the colloquial term is, mom and pop organizations, or garage, let's say garage-based organizations, everything up to full big registered companies. Those companies falling in the hospitality, tourism, retail, and then also some primary production sector guys. So guys making, for instance, a juice or a crushed garlic or something like that. They're starting out. They don't know where to go in such times. People are trying to find different ways of making money, and we have an internal standard which we've developed. So we call it the FCS standard, based predominantly around R638 and 10049, but then also using our 40+ experience as a company. So linear years, 40+ experience, just to develop a system that is not easy to follow, but just an audit standard that is it's a lot less cumbersome than a lot of the standards that are out there. And it's basically, you're following an FCS standard, you're covering a hell of a lot of all the bases you need to make your food safe. Might not be certified, whatever, but you can have some level of confidence having a good score on an FCS audit. And that's why we basically we did that in a lot of ways to help people that just don't know where to start and also don't know how to improve.
So I mean, I know that obviously COVID has been has really knocked the hospitality industry very, very much. I know that you've done a lot of restaurant, audits. The focus of your business has really been food service and hospitality. Now, I'd like to talk a little bit about that, because those kinds of audits are quite. We use the same auditing principles, but I think it's quite different to the certification audits that you would see at a manufacturer that is supplying food into the retail sector, or possibly, supplying food into the international market. So what qualifications would you be looking for those hospitality, hygiene / food safety audits against the FCS standard?
A lot of the qualifications run concurrent with a lot of what's being said now, but our base is to look for someone who's had a qualification in microbiology or food science. I myself have did a BSc in food science, but I'm actually one of the outliers, and most of my colleagues are microbiologists. Yes. So I had a little bit of learning, particularly after third year, a little bit of learning to do myself. We are different in that we focus on, because we use our own standard predominantly, even though it is based off a lot of other standards, but we're not looking for too much experience initially, but we do have quite a stringent in company training. So it starts very much with, first of all, I mean, you need your qualification, but then after that, it's a lot of in-service training, shadow auditing. You basically will be assigned on a day to be with another auditor, and then you would follow them. That auditor would then allow time to be able to train. So very hands-on in industry training. So those are we do take on a lot of people straight out of varsity sometimes, and which I think is quite unique for our company. People need the experience, but there's not a lot of places where to get experience, and that's the issue. But also we're not detached from how the industry needs to work from an experience perspective. One of the other themes that has been running through what a lot of the other panelists said is more personality based. So we're looking in our interview process. We know what your qualifications are by paper. I mean, we can know that in 5 minutes. When we look at an interview, we look at the person. So a lot of the themes that might be repeating what's been said, but we need someone who we're confident can manage their own time day to day. As an auditor, you're out on your own in the field, manage your time. You need to roll with the punches, particularly out hospitality sector, retail, so on ground retail sector. So I'm talking like at retail level. You need to roll with the punches. There's so many different things that could go wrong on a day, including people just not feeling like you being there, and that you need to deal with it. You need to be able to deal efficiently with processes and challenges that come up. You need to be able to handle them and still continue your work. So a lot of people get flustered. A burst tire, for instance, you're on your way to an audit, you get a burst tire. Oh no, well now my day, I can't carry on with my day. You might be out in a regional trip. You have to carry on. And then one of the big things is to follow instruction. And to be able to constantly be chasing deadlines. You do an audit, there's a deadline for reports to come out. There's the work's never done, so you need to be ready for that. That's it.
Absolutely. Yeah, I remember one audit, Shane. It was the sweetest Rusk lady, and I remember her giving me directions, and sort of the last email she sent me was, please make sure, if you think you lost, please make sure you phone me before you go over the bult. Because if you go over this hill, this koppie, there's no cell phone signal after that, and you won't be able to contact me, So I think there are many stories like that where you're in the middle of the sticks. You have, you didn't even know this place existed, but you do meet the nicest people. And I think, as you said, Cal, a lot can depend on literally just those first 5 minutes when you arrive and you introduce yourself, because if he is having a bad day, you can make it worse, or you can actually make it better. And a lot of it depends on you as a person and on whether you can actually manage that situation. Jess, a question for Cal, because this one sounds like a good opportunity for graduate entry as auditing, into auditing, if you would so wish. What's your question?
So more actually about what you do, but because of your initial statement where you guys do more than just certification audits, you really start with the small companies, the lady who's baking from home, which is very unique, and I haven't actually heard of people auditing or helping those people out from the auditor side before. So just from that perspective, what are your biggest challenges that you face, and then as well as the frustrations as a consultant and an auditor, especially when it comes to these smaller people, because there's such a negative association with auditors that I'm finding in the industry in general?
Well, you touched on exactly that, is that guys see you coming through with your white coat on and your hairnet, and they see you and they go, oh my word, what is this person walking into my place? This is now my business. And also fear. They have a fear of not knowing what they need to do. Things look very, very big on paper, and so the challenge is, see, a lot of guys they don't want to seem like they don't know. They want to seem like they're on top of it. Our favorite thing is we get, oh, I run a clean operation. Our operation is clean, and I mean, cleanliness is only part of food safety. You got a lot of procedures that you need to follow, but the challenges are very much that, and then also that people think they run an operation according to a certain way, and when you come in and audit, you kind of point out that what they think is going on is not really what's going on. So you're basically dashing their perceptions, unfortunately. So, yeah, sorry, Carol.
And then you mentioned that you guys obviously take a lot of young people. I do understand the value of industry experience, and I'd obviously love to do first quite a few years in industry just to gain that groundwork knowledge. But when you hire new auditors, what is your frustration with them as well? What tip would you give to first time, new incoming students or young professionals on that would help you out?
You see, again, like a lot of the guys have the knowledge. Please, there's been plenty frustrating people that you've had to deal with along the way. But I think it's more frustrations come from actually the person and not their qualification. So, I mean, you need people who can do the work and are willing to take on what is needed. A lot of, again, perceptions of what an auditor is and where their standing lies. I don't know if we're moving on to the next sector here, or the next question here, but basically you need to understand that you're in someone else's house. In essence, you've now walked into their home. You need to have a very strong sense of propriety. Yes. Particularly with the type of auditing we're doing, is we're there to consult and help. And often we've heard of our auditors, well, not so often, because it is kind of drummed out in our training. Our training is quite extensive. And we will not put an auditor out to pasture, let's say, to do their own thing or out in the field without being 100% guaranteed that they are going to do as is required, including how they interact. So if we see personality problems, we need to just address those and try help them sort those out. But you need to have a good sense of propriety, as I repeat myself. We're there to help, we're there to assist. And you also need to, a lot of the frustration is people don't know how the real world actually works. Often coming out of varsity, coming out of school varsity or other industries that have led you onto auditing, you develop bad habits, you develop bad manner in which you are working. You're by yourself in someone's space. You're there. Often you're initially an unwelcome entity, and you need to be you need to be cognizant of that, because if you are and you work your way around that, you actually get the job done a hell of a lot better.
Absolutely. Agreed, totally. Thanks, Carl. Right, I'd like to ask everyone to come back online. So cameras, please, all of you, I'd like to pose some questions so everybody can see everybody. Thank you so much. It's been absolutely fascinating listening to you. Carl, someone's already asking you for a job. One of the people online has already asked for an intern position. So yeah, we'll pass on your details. Tia, sure. You mentioned earlier that you were sitting at the SATCA offices having a board meeting. So I'd like to ask you, what is the SATCA thing? Because I'm sure there are lots of people that are listening that have heard that you have to be a SATCA registered auditor in order to do audits. What is this thing, and what does it mean for me as a person?
Thanks, Linda. Yes, just for those that's not familiar with SATCA, SATCA stands for South African Auditor Training and Certification Authority. Now, we've been working with SATCA for years now, and it's actually a very good step for auditors and potential auditors just like yourself, where you can be registered as a provincial auditor, and then as you grow, you do your audits, you will move up in terms of becoming a lead auditor. Now, the process that I follow, Linda, as you know, is quite strict. So they look at education, work experience, audit logs. Every year you have to list and send them your audit logs, your continuous training that you need. So it's a very good tool that people are using to make sure the auditor are approved for a certain sector. Because if you, for example, in meat, you can't necessarily go and audit bakery if you don't have the required skills, technical knowledge and training. And also, for my side, from the CB side, we make use of that as well, because SATCA is an extra check to make sure the auditor complies to the necessary requirements. So I think it's a very good tool for the industry.
So basically, Tia, what you're saying is we consider auditing to be a profession. So we're obviously not financial auditors. So within the financial auditing profession, there is a body that takes care of their professionalism. Engineers, for those of you that are scientists, you are familiar with SAC-NASP. So basically, what SACA does is it acts as this professional body in order to give recognition to the professional status that we have. So the requirements that Tia mentioned that you have to comply with, what SACA does is they audit those, and they actually are a certification body, and they would give you a certificate to confirm that based on your evidence. Am I right, Tia? I have to submit a whole pack of information, and based on my evidence, they then certify that I conform to those requirements. Am I correct, Tia?
You're 100% correct, Linda. And they're also, SATCA is also audited by SANAS. So it gives you that extra approval to make sure that they comply to rules and regulations. So it's very similar just to somebody that's witnessing the auditor, witnessing the next person, to give the industry the guarantee that the auditor is qualified to do that audit.
So everyone's auditing everybody. Now, Donna, Tia mentioned that she uses this as a tool for verification of auditor competence. Does a certification body, or rather, do I have to be a SATCA registered auditor in order to be a certification auditor for SGS, for example? Is this a mandatory requirement for certification audits?
No, because being an accredited certification body, we have certain criteria and standards and systems in place that we have to follow. When we get audited by UCAS, JASAN, SANAS, so by the way, we also get audited to death, not just by the accreditation bodies, but internally as a global company, we get audited by people from the UK that come in, internal audits, yes. But no, we don't require it, but we certainly support it. We have a lot of IRCA registered auditors. We have some SATCA registered auditors. It all depends on the need, in terms of what they're doing. So if they're subcontractors, they're doing work for other people, or whatever it is they're doing. So, but in terms of an accredited certification body, it's not a requirement to be SATCA registered.
Okay. So I think, like Tia's mentioned, she's using it. So each certification body will define, or has to define, what their criteria are. And then when they go through the process of selection, they have to ensure that their auditors comply. But we must understand that the accreditation bodies also set certain requirements in place that you have to comply with if you're an accredited certification body. So that's really, really important to bear in mind. I'm now going to hand over to my colleague Adele, and she's going to take us through a couple of questions. We've got 2 minutes, but if you don't mind, we're going to let it run for 5 more minutes because there's a couple of questions that have come through from you as the audience. We really would like to pose those. So I'm going to now hand over to Adele. Adele, you're going to take us away when it comes to those final questions. So thanks, that's over and out for me. Thanks, guys.
Hi, Linda.
Linda.
Sally, you're on mute.
You know what? I have to bring in the standard, the norm. Can you hear me? Hello? You're muted. So I have to bring that flair to the day.
Absolutely.
Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm literally going to read the questions as they are. So, and anybody on the panel, please feel free to answer. So I'm not going to direct it to anybody, but if anybody's got an input, it's fine. I've just got Casilda Malindi. She was asking, she's got 2 questions. Is what will an auditor cover, and what is the criteria for writing an audit report? So in terms of that, I think anybody, maybe you, Tia, just explaining the different criteria, different types of audits, because that's basically normally what covers an audit, if the person is going for certification. So, and then what skills would you need to have to enable you to write an audit report?
Yes, as we said earlier, auditing is the fun part. Writing the report is not always the fun part. I think you obviously, in terms of an auditor, we discussed the criteria, but writing the report, take into account English is not always our first language. We have to, as an auditor, always make sure you've got spell check, you've got grammar check, because at the end of the day, it's a report that your client is getting, and it reflects who you're auditing for that is getting that report. So I think you need to just make sure that your facts are there. And then in terms of part of the report, your non-conformances, that you declare the day of the audit. You cannot afterwards add anything to that. So that's also something, Jess, for example, that you guys can remember if you start auditing. What you do in the closing meeting, because that's how your audits works, opening meeting, auditing, and closing meeting. You then obviously identify those things. That will be in the report with all your notes and evidence that you collected during the day or 2-day audit. And that is part of your report writing. But when you do a lead auditor course, you get training on how to write those reports, depending on the level of auditing that you do and the type of audit that you're going to do.
Thank you very much, and I think something that's important is to understand, you know, it's a skill, like Reshmi also said. As you go along, you develop your skill. What I'm going to do, Teboho Matuba, I'm going to unmute you. I would like you to ask your question to the panel so that I don't misunderstand by just reading it. So I'm unmuting you, Teboho.
Hello?
Yes, we can hear you. Please ask your question.
Okay. All right. So I got fortunate to get an Erasmus Mundus scholarship to go to France and study a course called Food Identity, which focuses on geographical indications, which I think some people know of them and some don't. So I was curious, do we have bodies or organizations that can give such an accreditation here in South Africa in terms of that? Because I know that in South Africa we have products like Raybos, which can qualify as one, and there's wines as well. And yeah, so that was the part one of the question. And then the second part was, is there you know, schools or whatever where we can actually attend to become like a course where we can do to become an auditor, or it's always have to be small courses and so on? Yeah, because I've been trying to get some information on that since it was something that was of interest, but I'm not really finding a straight route. It's like chaotic. Yeah.
Thank you. Is there anybody on the panel that can answer that?
Gosh, in terms of auditors courses, there's a lot of training providers that do offer the auditing courses. But yes, I think you just need to do your homework in terms of the credibility of the provider and what recognition that course may have. And if I could understand your first question, is this about the integrity of a product? So to certify the product's integrity.
I think to some extent it is, but also it's just it's because they look at it as a part of a food system, but it's almost like in France they have something called Label Rouge, which is almost like a quality system as well. So it's just sort of like a quality mark that kind of gives the product a bit of an edge as compared to maybe other product that may exist of similar traits. But because it's tied with history and locality and all of that, it kind of makes it a bit more expensive than your counterparts.
Yeah, so SGS does have a laboratory in Germany that does that type of verification. In South Africa, I'm not sure, I'm not fully up to speed in terms of the laboratories, what they are, but I do think we have a couple in South Africa that are doing verification of certain products. I don't know, I think maybe the other panelists.
Yeah, what I can do is, I'll take this offline. If I've got your email address, so you know, we can communicate further. And if I get any feedback or more information on it, I will definitely answer the question for you further. Thanks for your input, Donna. I really appreciate that. And then let's quickly see. So Lisa's saying, in my experience of being an auditee, I've heard most auditors saying that they are not allowed to give recommendations to the clients during an audit, because that would mean that they are consulting, but some do it anyway. So personally, as an auditor, is it unethical to give recommendations to a client, especially where you feel it can help improve the food safety management system of the client's company? So who would like to give a go on that one?
So can I just add something to that? Could you also specify in the report if you would give, I mean, there's obviously clear things, Rashmi, you mentioned it as well, that you notice where you could improve. But if you are, you know, doing a certification audit in particular, is this something you'd put in your report as well? Sorry.
So I'd like to answer that question, Adele. So it also it depends on what type of audit you're doing. So if it's a certification or audit, definitely not. You're not really allowed to help and have recommendations. I mean, as auditors, we are full of solutions and recommendations. So sometimes we might say something, and to you it seems like a recommendation, but you know, we're just saying it because it comes out of a standard, and this is what we know about its implementation. So there again, it depends on the audit. So if it's regulatory or certification audit, normally you're not going to get any recommendations. But if it's an audit like a gap audit that I mentioned before, or the type of audits that Cal mentioned as well, then yes, it is full of recommendations. In fact, when I conduct gap audits or internal audits or even verification audits for companies before they actually go for certification, I sometimes end up having to type like this, gee whiz, this 20 or 25 page report. And the majority of the report is the recommendations of how they can improve, you know, especially when it comes to their document management system. You know, they may not have the right procedures in place. And it's just to give them a couple of examples or whatever. So I do the helpful audits. So yes, there would be recommendations. But in terms of the regulatory and certification audits, no, you're not going to get that. You know, you must know your stuff and have it in order.
Would it be considered a recommendation if you had to point them back to the direction of the standard that they're being audited on? So
no,
it could be like, okay.
That you're allowed to do in any event at the closing meeting, and the way you note down the findings as well. I mean, you know, you don't just mention a finding out of the blue, actually, as much as we'd like to, because the standard doesn't cover every single inch of the factory. So when you have a list of findings, you need to be able to cross-reference it to a standard or clause or requirement, dependent, again, on what type of audit you're doing.
Okay, awesome. We still got a lot of questions in terms of where do I go for training? How do I go for training? We will definitely answer those for you in terms of, you know, sending you, we've got Foodemy, the website where you can go and have a look at training course providers offering these types of training. A lot of people are asking about how do you, you know, get audit times and hour times and shadow time and all of that. I think what we will do is we will provide the contact details of the presenters today for everybody in any event that is attending today, so that you can interact with them one-on-one. Is there any closing comments from our panel that they would like to share with everybody that's looking that want to become auditors?
I would say that I would like to say that, you know, auditing definitely exposes you to a lot of stuff, whether it's product, personalities. It challenges you at multiple levels. I think even if you did it for 5 years or 2 years or whatever it was, it's probably some of the best experience you'll get.
Definitely. Yeah. And something that I myself was also an auditor when I was still based in South Africa. If I suggest to you, minute everything, you know, start a journal. So because you heard when you go to SATCA or IRCA, you need to, you know, give them evidence. So don't think anything is too small. Start your journal, you know, take your times down. If you do anything with someone, if you attend any courses or whatever, keep those information in detail, because it all helps you, you know, to build your profile when you get to the point. And like Carl also said, you know, when you go for interviews and all of that, yes, on paper it looks good, but you know, by showing that you're constantly looking at building your hours and building up your journal is also good. Okay, I don't know, can everybody see my screen? Because I'm very excited. I would really like you guys to go. Our registration page is ready from today. We're having our Food Safety Summit 2021 summit, and our theme for this year is teaming up for safe food now for a healthy tomorrow. Registrations is open. It's at www.foodsafetysummit.co.za. The first 100 people that register for both days, there's a special gift, and it's not going to be a virtual gift that will be delivered to your doorstep. So please make sure that you're one of those. To the panel, thank you so much. Thank you for being our heroes in terms of making sure that everybody that's manufacturing food is doing the right things. And you guys must have an awesome Friday and a blessed weekend. Thank you, everybody. And thanks for all our delegates.
Thank you, everyone, for your time.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye.